Welcome back, fellow internet adventurers. Get ready for another wild ride through Reddit's strangest stories. We're diving deep into the internet's quirkiest corners. Grab your popcorn and join us on this adventure. Don't forget to hit subscribe and like. Let's get started. When I married Jillian, or Jill as she preferred to be called, I had no idea about the nightmare that would unfold. My name is Tony Rowan, and as I mentioned, my wife's name is Jill. When we got married, I was sure we would grow old together and enjoy our grandchildren. I started my own business as a consulting engineer 2 years after we got married, while Jill worked for a small medical supplies company. We both decided to save money before having kids. We were happy for 8 years, and our sex life was good. I thought I had found the perfect wife. I bought a small cottage in a quiet area. It needed a lot of fixing up inside, but it was sturdy. Our closest neighbor was far away, and there were only a few other houses nearby. It took almost a year to finish the house. We did most of the work ourselves, but I hired workers for plumbing and electrical tasks. I was happy when it was finally done. Jill and I often talked about how perfect it would be when we finally had children. Everything went wrong just before our 9th anniversary. Jill often became very harsh with me, and adding to the fact that our bed life was practically dead, I started to get mad at her attitude. Jill started dating girls from work a few nights a week, or so she said. Wherever they went, it must have been nice because she never came home before midnight. I began to think the worst, but I reasoned that she would never cheat on me, even though I didn't realize how wrong I was. I had a childhood friend, Barry Patton, whom I turned to for advice. Barry and I have been friends since we met in our freshman year of high school. As my company expanded and I needed an executive director, I turned to Barry because he was someone I could trust. Barry knew Jill, and at first, he couldn't believe what I was telling him. But after learning the details, he changed his mind. All the signs are there, Tony. If you want my opinion, I think Jill is cheating on you. I'm sorry to break the bad news, but I'd bet my career on it. When Barry said that, I knew he wasn't joking. I thanked him and returned to my office. Sitting at my desk, I thought about what to do in this situation. If Jill was cheating, then that was it. Our marriage would be over. The problem was that she could take half of what I owned if we split up. I looked for a private investigator and found one who could meet me later that day. When I talked to Joe Ames, the investigator, he promised to find evidence if Jill was cheating. I left feeling a bit relieved, but deep down, I hoped I was wrong and wasting my money. The next day, a technician came to the cottage to install hidden cameras and a voice recorder. I didn't think it would show anything because Jill wouldn't be dumb enough to use her home phone if she was cheating. A week later, I heard from Joe, and the news was awful. It's all in the report, and the DVD shows everything clearly. If I were you, I wouldn't watch it. Knowing is one thing, but seeing is a completely different game. Thanking Joe for his advice, I paid him the last fee and left with the report and the DVD. Back in my office, I didn't follow Joe's advice and watched the DVD. The report revealed that her so-called outings with the girls were a cover for her to make love to some jerk she was working with. They took several long lunches and an afternoon off to go and make love at a motel a few miles away. The report also said that they went to his house several times. The DVD recorded on Thursday showed Jill arriving home in the afternoon with a man. They immediately went into the bedroom and made love like wild animals for several hours. Jill did everything for him. What really shocked and disgusted me was what Jill said to her lover. I need to meet you and the guys again. What we have is great. It's paradise. I had never met a guy with whom she made love, and except for a large male organ, there was not much to choose between him and me. I had a decent 20 centimeters, but it was at least 5 centimeters longer. We were both about the same age and build. With the evidence, I planned to catch them at the cottage. I would beat the hell out of it and throw Jill out on the street. The following Thursday, I left work and drove past where we lived, and sure enough, Jill's car and another one I didn't recognize were parked in the driveway. I parked my car and went into my house. Inside, I heard noises coming from upstairs. I rushed into the bedroom and told the guy there to leave, but it was a mistake. He was much bigger and stronger than me. He knocked me out, and when I woke up, I was tied to a chair with something in my mouth to keep me quiet. Jill was in bed with 3 guys, and they were being loud. One of them saw that I was awake and mocked me for being weak. They all laughed. I watched as Jill freed herself from the massive bodies on the bed and walked over to where I was sitting. The woman I married was standing there, smiling, her face covered in liquid, with drops running down her leg. She pulled the gag out of my mouth. "Why do this to us?" I asked. "I realize that being married to you is boring. I want to have fun, and all you need is kids and a wife at home to look after you." "Well, that's not going to happen. You thought you could barge in and ruin my fun, didn't you?" Jill stared at me with a sickly smile on her face. "As you can see, I have 3 real men here who are satisfying me now, so I don't need you anymore. You and your worthless little male organ. Now that we're done, my friends are going to take you somewhere. I hope you like it." I didn't know the woman standing in front of me. Of course, it wasn't my wife. Jill wouldn't do that to me, would she? One of the guys came up and hit me hard in the face. The lights went out, and I blacked out. When I woke up, it was dark, and I was confused for a moment. I realized I was lying down with my hands and feet tied, and something covering my head. I could feel the movement of a vehicle, probably a van. From the cold metal floor, I heard voices saying they thought I was waking up. They mentioned being close to their destination. The rough road made my head ache from an earlier blow. When the van stopped, I felt relieved, but I soon realized it might have been better if they had kept driving. "Untie his legs. At least he will be able to walk his last few steps," one voice said. The last few steps. I suddenly realized that I was about to be killed, or so it seemed to me. I was led over some uneven ground and almost fell several times. "Get up, you bastard. I'm not going to carry you now. Go," a voice instructed me, and a hand slapped the back of my head. I silently prayed that whatever they were going to do to me would be quick, and if that was my fate, then get it over with as soon as possible.
"Boss."
I stood there waiting to hear the click of a loaded pistol. The hood over my head did not allow me to see anything. Suddenly, they started kicking and punching me, and I fell to the ground. The blows continued until my battered body lay motionless. I knew I was still alive, barely, but still alive. I felt a hand touch my neck, fingers gently moving around. "There is no pulse. He's dead. Should we bury him or leave him here?" "To hell with it. Leave him here. There's no one around for miles, and if his body is ever found, there won't be much left of him anyway." If the guy who was checking on me knew what he was doing, he would have felt my pulse, but where his fingers touched my neck, he had no chance. I could hear the attackers laughing at me as they left. I lay motionless for what felt like several hours. In fact, it must have been about 10 minutes. I didn't move until I heard the sound of a car driving away in the distance. As I lay on the ground, I wondered what made Jill hate me so much. Why did she choose to be promiscuous and prefer a large penis? I've always treated her well. I remembered her comment about my average-sized penis, which is 20 centimeters, so it's not small. Pain shot through me as I tried to stand up. It took a few tries because my wrists were tied. Finally, I managed to stand, my body aching as if I'd been hit by a truck. I knew I had to remove the hood from my head first. It was battered and blocking my vision. I didn't want to be in total darkness. I felt around and found a bush, pressing my head against it to try to remove the hood. Eventually, the hood caught, and I was able to get it off. My eyes adjusted to the other darkness. To be honest, my left eye was closed and wasn't much use anyway. I just hoped that what happened wasn't forever. When my eyes got used to the darkness, I had no idea where I was. All I knew was that I had been left in a forest or thicket. I was in no condition to climb after some kind of fall. I'm not an ex-military man or anything like that, just a normal guy who didn't want to die. It took everything I had left to wander in one direction, and sometime later, still in great pain, I noticed a light in the distance. As I approached the light source, I realized it was a cottage or farmhouse, and I found enough energy within myself to reach the gate. Trying to open it was beyond my strength. I screamed, and suddenly everything was plunged into darkness again. When I managed to open my eyes, the left one was still closed, and I noticed that I was in a room. I tried to sit up, but the pain was too much, so I flopped back onto my bed. "Please don't move." Obviously, I had an accident or something. I looked up and saw a woman standing over me. "Who are you? How did I get here?" "I found you outside the house last night. I heard you scream, and when I looked around, You were lying on the ground, unconscious. I remembered trying to open the gate. Now lie still and tell me what happened, if you can remember. Oh, I remembered everything perfectly. I just wasn't sure if it was worth discussing with this strange woman. My name is Rosemary, but you can call me Rosie. I prefer it that way. So how the hell did you end up in this state? It's a long story, and I'm not sure if I should tell you. My ribs hurt whenever I tried to speak or breathe heavily. Should I call the police? No, please, no police. I promise you that I won't hurt you, and I'll tell you what happened, just not right now. Rosie smiled. I must have passed out because I don't remember anything after that. The next time I woke up, Rosie was in the room, and this time I managed to sit up. Rosie fluffed up a couple of pillows so I could sit up properly. I saw that my torso was wrapped in bandages, and there were several cuts on my arms and legs. Rosie nodded and handed me a small mirror. I almost dropped it when I saw my reflection. My lips were cut and swollen. My left eye was blackened and swollen. My right eye was badly bruised, and I had several more cuts on my face. Now are you ready to tell me who you are and what happened? I nodded my head. I told Rosie everything I could remember, from finding Jill in bed with 3 men to trying to open her gate. Tony, you really should call the police. You know that. No, please don't. I will deal with this in my own way and in my own time. The last thing I need is police intervention. Have it your way and do what you have to do now. I do not know where you live or anything like that, so you better stay here until you are mobile and healthy enough to leave. I thank Rosie for her kindness. I had no idea who this woman was. I think she was about 45 years old, which is a good 10 years older than me. Rosie let me use her phone to call Barry and let him know that I was okay. Tony, where the hell have you been? Everyone is going crazy trying to find you. Jill was here, terribly worried that you were missing. Barry, can you do me a favor, please? If Jill asks, you haven't heard from me at all. I promise that I will explain everything at the next meeting. If something comes up at work, I trust you to deal with it. I ended the conversation, and Barry seemed satisfied. Rosie asked me what my plans were. I'm going to rest until I can move around and get back home. After that, I'm going to make some people pay for everything. I don't know how yet, but they will pay. Rosie just nodded and smiled. Do what you have to do, Tony, but please be careful. It suddenly dawned on me that, other than knowing her name, I didn't know anything about Rosie. Come to think of it, I had no idea where I was. When Rosie told me the name of the nearest village, I realized I must have been at least 3 hours away from home. Rosie took care of me, feeding and looking after me, and it wasn't until a few weeks later that I felt well enough to leave. I told Rosie I'd call someone to pick me up. She offered to drop me off at the train station in the village, saying no one would be able to find her remote location. Getting into Rosie's small car was a struggle, showing I wasn't fully recovered yet. I thanked Rosie for everything, and she simply urged me to be careful. I sat and waited for Barry to pick me up. Jesus Christ, Tony, what the hell happened to you? Barry asked as he appeared on the way back. I told Barry everything, and he shook his head in disbelief. I think I know why she did it, Barry. If we get divorced, she gets half of everything. Jill is greedy and wants to get everything. I bet she promised her hookup buddies a bunch of cash to get rid of me. She knows the company is worth millions. I think she would sell it and spend her days making love to whoever wants her. You can stay at my place, buddy. If anyone asks, I'll tell them I have no idea where you are. Thanks, Barry. Do me a favor, please bring my laptop from the office. Oh, and I'm going to need some clothes. Barry laughed and said he felt like he was harboring a fugitive. Not yet, but it could happen if I get caught taking revenge. Well then, you'd better not get caught. I don't want to know what you're planning. On the way, we stopped at a shopping mall. I managed to get some jeans, t-shirts, socks, underwear, and a pair of sneakers. At the moment, this is quite enough. I had a full wardrobe at home, or at least I hoped it was. Fortunately, it was dark when we arrived at Barry's house, and I could only imagine the neighbors talking about me. According to Barry, Jill played the role of a loving wife very well. She called everyone who knew me, everyone except the police. She called Barry regularly, every day, and asked if he had heard from me. Of course, his answer was no. Gradually, I recovered and was able to walk without experiencing severe pain. Barry told me that Jill's calls have now been reduced to 1 call a week. I assumed she was too busy enjoying herself to worry about me. Sometimes, it's useful to have time to think. In my case, it led me to consider how terrible my revenge would be. I wanted to take real revenge, and I was analyzing the options. Sitting around all day, I came up with several ways to deal with Jill and her bedfellows. The problem was that most of my ideas involved someone else, and this is something I wasn't ready for. My hatred led me to what is known as the dark web after reading it. I understood that I could hire a hitman if I wanted to. The document discussed hiring someone to do a job using terms from the dark web. I devised a plan but didn't know how to execute it. Out of desperation and anger, I left a message asking for help with a chemical issue. I received some messages from strange individuals, but one seemed to grasp what I meant. After a few more exchanges, I believed he was genuine. He ensured I wasn't from the police and sent me a program to install that made our messages secret. Then I logged out and closed the VPN software. I searched online for the items I needed to purchase, but it took longer because I required specific brands. Once I had everything, I realized I needed to know when Jill and her lovers would be in the house for my plan to succeed. When I returned online, I bought several listening devices, or bugs. Barry and I talked most evenings. He never asked me what I planned to do, and I never told him. Things were going well, and the company had attracted several new clients. I assured Barry that I would most likely be back at the office in a week or two. When the bugs arrived, I returned to the house. Jill's car was parked in the driveway. Maybe she had a quiet night last night. I didn't know, and I didn't care. I watched Jill leave the house, and 5 minutes later, I went inside. Thank God it didn't occur to her to change the locks. Apparently, she was sure that I was dead, so there was no reason to worry. I installed a bug in the living room and in the bedroom. I must say that despite having men in her house, it was clean and tidy. There were clean sheets on the bed and no signs that anyone else was there. That evening, I heard Jill talking to a man. I recognized the voice of one of the men from the van. He was there with Jill and informed her that he had made an appointment with the others for Friday night. Jill asked, "Oh my God, I love your big organ. How many of them will be here?" I managed to persuade 9 guys. There would be 10 of them, but one wouldn't be able to come this week. 9 is enough for me. Now take me. All these conversations turn me on and make me wet. I turned off my laptop. I didn't need to hear them laughing. I hoped he would like it because if my plan worked, then no one would sleep with Jill after Friday. On Friday evening, I hid in the bushes outside our house, waiting for something to happen. Eventually, Jill came home with several cars following her. I waited for about 30 minutes, thinking they would have started whatever they were doing by then. Slowly, I walked to the back door. Upstairs, I heard Jill yelling for them to hurry up, and everyone else was cheering her on. Quietly, I went upstairs to check if everyone was in the bedroom. Then I poured 2 liquids onto the carpet, making a trail back to the kitchen. When the liquids mixed, there was hardly any smell, just as the person who told me about it said. He warned me that the more I used, the stronger the end result. Back in the kitchen, I faced the difficult part. If I messed it up, we were all going to hell. The third liquid, in fact, served as a trigger. As soon as it mixed with the others and reacted, all hell would break loose. I poured the liquid into a puddle next to the other 2. I thought it would take them a few minutes to come into contact with each other, slowly and noiselessly. I stepped out the door, closing it softly behind me. I raced down the path to where I had parked the rented car. As I drove away, I saw a powerful bright flash in the rearview mirror. I didn't stop. I just kept driving until I reached Barry's house. Fortunately, Barry had a date and wasn't home when I arrived. I took a shower and went to bed. The next morning, I drove back to the house, acting as if I wanted to let Jill know I was alive, despite her friend's best efforts. Another part of my plan was to collect my clothes and some personal belongings, even though I knew they were all burned. When I turned into an alley, a policeman stopped me. "I'm sorry, sir, you can't go any further. But I live here, just down the road at Laurel Cottage Park. Park the car and wait here, please." The officer approached the cottage, and moments later, he returned with a man in a suit.
"I'm Detective Inspector Hobson."
"Do you mind if I ask where you were last night?" "I was at home." "Well, actually, I live with a friend. My wife and I live separately." "How long have you been staying with this friend?" "A couple of months now." I just came to pick up my last clothes and personal belongings. Unfortunately, there was a fire in the cottage last night. Can I see it? I mean, after all, this is my house. Or was it? We walked along the path together. The detective asked me more questions. Did I keep flammable materials at home? No, by no means. There was a small gasoline canister in the barn. I used it to refuel my lawnmower. The cottage is completely ruined now. One end of the wall collapsed, and the roof is slanted uncomfortably. As you can see, sir, the fire destroyed the whole building. Only firefighters and rescuers can go inside right now. They're removing the bodies. Did your wife have any friends over last night? I don't know. Like I said, we broke up. I have no idea what she did last night. You mentioned they're removing bodies. How many are there? 10 so far. They think they found everyone, but they're double-checking to be sure. I was shocked, like anyone would be in my position. I thanked the detective and went back to my car a few miles away. I called Barry and explained the situation. He promised to confirm that we were home all night. I told the police that Jill and I had split up and that I would stay with Barry until we sorted everything out. The investigation of the fire was completed 2 months later. It was recognized as an accident, probably due to a malfunction of the gas appliance. The coroner recorded verdicts of accidental death for those who died in the fire, 1 woman and 9 men. In my statement, I pointed out that Jill was probably throwing a party with one of her work colleagues since we were separated. I didn't have a better answer. I attended Jill's funeral more for decency than anything else, and when the coffin was lowered into the ground, I threw in a handful of earth and 1 rose. There was a postcard pinned to the stem of the rose. I wrote on it, "Burn in hell." Most of those present probably thought it was a personal gesture of love. Yes, exactly, as if it could be. Jill's mother actually asked me why I wasn't at home that night and what Jill was doing in the house with 9 men. We were separated, pending a divorce. As for why she had 9 men in her house, you figure it out for yourself. I turned and walked away. I moved out of Barry's house into a small furnished apartment. The only serious loss was having to replace my entire wardrobe. In the end, the insurance company paid for the house, and I sold the plot to the developer as I did not want to rebuild it. The media speculated about why there were 9 men and 1 woman in the house that night. I didn't say anything, letting people decide for themselves about the 9 men. I didn't know them, and I didn't read about their funerals in the newspaper. I wanted to thank Rosie for saving me, but I couldn't find her cottage even after asking locals for help. Barry never mentioned the fire. Instead, he suggested we go on a date. Right now, I just want to move forward with my life, especially since there's a woman who lives in the same apartment building as me. We haven't talked yet, except to say hello to each other. If we really start dating and it gets serious, then the prenuptial agreement will be finalized before I get married again. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe for more.